Welcome to r/slash Askreddit, where we answer the question, people who worked in restaurants, what was the worst customer you had to deal with? Our first reply is from Daofu. I worked in a popular restaurant for a while. We usually have quite a long wait, 30 to 40 minutes during dinner service, and people are told by the hosts about this. There was this lady that got fed up with the wait after 10 minutes. She stormed into the restaurant, stood next to a table of 4 people, and literally asked them, "Are you guys done? We've been waiting for a long time now and would like to have the table if you guys are just chatting." I was completely mind blown how people are able to not give a flip and pull something like this in public. Fun Yes Gina replies, "What did the table say?" And Dr. LeQuinner says, "Needless to say, the table just stood there with its 4 legs." Our next reply is from Arcanum Fish. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it, so instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. She recognized me the first day, but I played it off like I didn't know her. Saint Bart replies to that comment, "I had a similar experience. I served a couple once and we got along really well. No complaints about anything. I ran the guy's card and it declined. I told my manager, and when he went to talk to them, they told him that I was a horrible server and treated them like garbage. They left me a penny tip." OP, it sucks that you had to go through that, but my guess is that the reason why they did that is that they were hoping they would get the meal comped. Can't afford the meal? No problem. I'll just throw the waiter under the bus and make the manager feel guilty and get a free meal out of it. Our next reply is from Vulnerable Kimchi. Barista here. Had a guy that regularly came in and ordered a complicated drink. He always finished the order by asking for a finger swirl in the drink. If you gave him a confused look, he would say, "Well, how else am I gonna taste you?" He was the worst. I can't tell which is worse, the fact that this guy was trying to taste girls' fingers, or that he was expecting them to dip their fingers into boiling hot coffee. Our next reply is from Kagar the Destroyer. I used to work in a bar that sold very old booze. A drunk man tried to impress his friends by chugging from a bottle of Amaro from the early 60s. He had to pay for the whole thing since his lips touched it and it was useless. Cost him around $800. Our next reply is from Rads. Our bar was having a private party. A drunk dude walks in and orders a drink. I knew that he wasn't with the party based on his attire and that he came in every so often. I told him I couldn't get him a drink. He lost his mind. Told me to F off and then wanted to fight me. On his way out, he yelled that we should put up signs. As he walked by the signs on the door saying we were closed for a private event. He came in the next day sober and apologized. And Mr. Effing Optimism replies to that comment. Only slightly related, but I once had a woman walk in when we were closed, flip the sign over to open, and was then furious that we wouldn't serve her. Our next reply is from the Squirrel Within. Way back in the 80s, I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days, Jeff Smith of the Frugal Gourmet. Never seen a bigger douchebag than that guy. Literally made our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending, yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation of being a jerk off camera. Eventually, he was disgraced by being outed as a child predator and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr of the Galloping Gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. Beneath this comment, people are discussing how much of a douchebag that guy really was. Apparently, he would hire young boys, as in 14 and younger, just so he could molest them. He also picked up and molested teenage hitchhikers. But you might be interested to learn that he's now dead. Our next reply is from Whomper. After a wedding reception ended at our facility, we were cleaning, and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The party was over almost half an hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out, and the father of the bride asked me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy a guest's needs, but the machine was cleaning and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding and stormed to our banquets manager and told them I refused to make it for him. Manager is a douchebag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine is just finishing the cleaning process and it was impossible to make it beforehand. I got suspended for 2 weeks. Our next reply is from Loves Me Tacos. This one guy who basically hated his order so much that he waved me over and told me to put my hand out and proceeded to spit out entirely what was in his mouth into my hand. Then tell me to refund him and then make him something else. And then, after getting 12,000 upvotes on this comment, OP posted an update. I'd like to point out that I was too shocked to really retaliate to what he did at that moment. I don't like confrontation, so I walked away to the bathroom and cleaned my hands for what felt like hours. My coworker saw what happened and told my boss, who kicked him out, and he was no longer allowed back. Anyways, have a great day. And then I was asleep replied to that comment. This one time my uncle was waiting tables and a group of like 5 business dudes were hassling my uncle the whole time. At the end of the meal when he was clearing the table, one of them tried to tip him $100 and said something like, "Here's the most money you'll probably see," and shoved it into his apron. He replied, "Mother effer, I don't need this," then shoved the $100 bill in his mouth. I feel like there should be a special layer of hell for people who abuse their waitstaff. Our next reply is from Penguin. I waited tables for a few years in college, and the worst table that I ever had was a Catholic priest and some guy who was trying to hit up for donations. The whole meal, he was very condescending and demanding. After everything was done, I left the check at the table. He ended up walking out, stiffing me not just on the tip, but on the entire check. He even stole the leather check holder thing. I reported this to my manager. A couple weeks later, this same guy comes in with about 20 members of his congregation. My manager told him he wasn't welcome in our restaurant after walking out on his previous tab in front of his whole party. They all ended up leaving to go elsewhere. Best manager I've ever had. Why do I get the feeling that this priest is one of those priests who tried to hold services during the COVID-19 quarantine? Our next reply is from Alberta Wegwillen, who has several customers. A homeless guy who came in, actively dripping blood from his hands, and started screaming at me and threatening me because I wouldn't give him a bakery case item without him paying. He was dripping blood all over the counters and spitting everywhere until I threatened to call the cops. A huge group of clearly rich kids who came in, stole a bunch of drinks, and left the dining room trashed. A guy who demanded I take money from our tip jar to help him pay for his order and argued with me when I said no. People who would place large orders or even take home a cake and eat half of it, then flip their lid and demand a refund when they'd find out it was all vegan, even though that fact was well advertised. Our next reply is from Pianist Kryef. My friend works at a restaurant. A vlogger was shooting a video, and since it was allowed within the place, nobody troubled her. Apparently, she wanted one of those gone sexual clickbait thumbnails, so she asked my friend to place his face in her breast while she squirted ketchup on herself. My friend refused as he was in a relationship, but some other employee agreed to do so. After they shot the thumbnail, she marched in the next day claiming sexual assault. I don't know what happened after that, but it didn't turn out well for the liar. Man, it's YouTubers like this lady who give YouTubers like me a bad name. Influencers nowadays have such a bad reputation, but to be honest, most of us are just hanging out in our basement making videos, not rubbing our genitals in other people's faces and squirting ketchup on ourselves. Our next reply is from Moxfora. Bartending in a restaurant a few years ago. There was a private party and one of the guests asked me to plug in his iPhone to listen to a song. I did it and he tipped me $20. He left his phone behind the bar and got wasted. When he was leaving, I said, "Sir, don't forget about your phone." He threw a beer on me and told me to leave him the F alone and told me to get a real job. Guess who got to keep a nice new iPhone? And then Tanned Croissant adds this reply. We had someone do a Dine and Dash once and they left their phone. Reasonably expensive one, although this was over 10 years ago, so I can't remember if they were as much as they are now. He sheepishly came back the next day asking if one had been handed in. Our boss said no and kept the phone. Our next reply is from 6s and 7s. I worked in Domino's. I had a guy throw a handful of pennies at me while laughing. The 30-odd cents was my tip. He was mad when I turned around and walked away without picking any of them up. His exact words were, "Oh, my money not good enough for you? Fine, I'll never order Domino's again." I've never had a customer fire themselves like that before. It was great. Our next reply is from Raccoon. This old guy who asked if I was included in the order. I'm 17. Then Funny Yes Johnny replies to that, this happened to me when I was about that age. Some guy asked if I was on the dessert menu. I pretended so hard not to understand him that he actually got embarrassed, left a generous tip, and politely left without another word. Our next Ask Reddit question is, what's the worst thing that's happened at a high school reunion party you attended? Our first reply is from Underpants Bandit. My sister, my now husband, and I were all in the same graduating class, plus my husband's best friend. Best friend's name is something like John Smith. Very common. He was very popular in high school. Super nice guy, stood out in a crowd. If you didn't know him, you certainly knew of him, even in a massive school. So anyway, the 20-year-old reunion rolls around. My sister is the only one who wanted to go. She called right after, very upset. Apparently, there was a huge memorial wall for John Smith, who had just died. None of us knew. Awful. My husband was like, but we just saw him. He called him up and was like, hey dude, are you dead? No, not dead. Surprised, but not dead. Anyway, it turned out the much less popular other John Smith was the one who died. They made a lovely memorial for the wrong guy who was forgotten totally. We still run into people to this day who see him and are like, hey, aren't you supposed to be dead? Man, that's really sad for the other John Smith, but I want to know how the John Smith that you know responds to those comments. Yeah, I was dead for a while, but luckily I came back. Our next reply is from Bob Might Be Cool. Some girl confessed to cheating on her high school sweetheart, thinking enough time had passed it wouldn't bother him. She thought wrong. Edit, since this was so well received, I'll add some details here so that they're all in one place. The reunion was 10 years later. The two of them hadn't seen each other in years. As far as I know, they broke up shortly after high school ended. After she broke the news, somewhat nonchalantly as well, the guy flipped out and slapped her, then started screaming at her. She ran away, at which point he broke down and said something about wasting his high school years and left. We still managed to have a good time even after all that though, which was nice. Our next reply is from Mastodon Bob. One guy had made not one, but 2 fortunes and had a net worth of well over $100 million by our 20th reunion. High-speed modem patents in the late 1980s, early investor in broadband. Right place at the right time. He'd already retired. On our classmate update bulletin, he listed his occupation as unemployed and unemployable as a bit of a gag. Some of the well-meaning but clueless types sought him out to offer encouragement and tips on how to find work. Hey man, that's a really tough break about the jobs. Just keep getting out there, hopefully you'll find something. Dude, you realize I have $100 million, right? Our next reply is from Tuba Boliviano. Didn't happen to me, but I had this friend who got someone pregnant back in the day and she kept the kid. They've both been great about it. He helps financially, but that was the extent of his contribution. She married soon out of high school and met a great guy who has been the de facto dad. Either way, it's a day where you bring your kids if you have them event, and someone let slip that my friend is the kid's real dad. And the kid heard it, and it was an effing catastrophe. Everyone was trying to figure out who said that, and how could someone spill that secret, etc. In the end, my friend pretended he was shocked and laughed it off as a joke, which honestly in front of the kid was probably a good move. Our next reply is from Fall On Me. It wasn't really bad, just odd. A guy came with full Kiss-style makeup on. White face, black shapes around his eyes, and black lips. We were too awkward and polite to mention it, so everyone just chatted with him as though it was completely normal to turn up like that. Our next reply is from Infinite Pizzazz. At my 10-year reunion, the organizers were doing the thing where they give awards for the person who came the farthest to attend, the person with the most kids, etc. The award came up for who had the oldest kid, and people started shouting out their kids' ages. When it quieted down, this shy girl near the front said in a normal voice, 11. And that's when we all realized why we had stopped seeing Heather right before graduation. Our next reply is from Pedantic Dullard. At my 20-year reunion, 2 decades after high school, 2 guys got arrested for fistfighting on the sidewalk outside the bar we went to Friday night. Why were they fighting? One of the guys slept with the other guy's girlfriend in high school and drunkenly brought up the 20 years ago fling. Neither of them married her or even dated her after high school. Those idiots got charges 20 years later for, though. That was r/Askreddit, and my Askreddit question to you is, did you remember to like, comment, and subscribe?